Hi, I'm Coach Amber. Welcome to the Meet RX Success Story podcast. And today we have a special guest with us, Vivica Menengaz. Hi, Vivica.
Hi, Amber. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on. So, can you kind of give us an idea of what your life was like, your health, and et cetera, before you went on a more meat based diet? Just kind of give us an idea where you were at.
Yeah, well, I had a lot of different issues that developed through time. And starting out, the first thing that really came up on my radar was pre-diabetes. So just started checking my blood sugars and realizing that they were way up there and I had no idea. And this is already after I started studying nutrition and I was eating paleo and nutrient dense diet. I thought I was doing all the right things, and I was just like eating so many carbs and I had no idea that was affecting me, which is kind of funny because I should have known as my maternal grandfather died of diabetes, so it should have been on my radar. But it's amazing of the things that we just like don't think of or don't want to be present to, especially when it comes to our health. So it started out with pre-diabetes and then shortly afterwards got into hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And at that point, I had already started a ketogenic diet. So keto basically helped me with the pre-diabetes, reversing insulin resistance. And I always ate a very clean ketogenic diet. So for me, meat has always been the kind of the foundation of my diet. But at that point, I was still eating a lot of like nut flours, low carb flours, doing like the low carb keto baking, lots of nuts, and, not realizing how inflammatory those were and how really not serving my body. So through this period, I also had perimenopause. I had to deal with fibroids, hemorrhaging, and like, it was a pretty rocky period. And at some point, as I was already established in keto for about 2 years, and resolving my issues, feeling better, Hashimoto's has gone down, almost disappeared. But then all of a sudden I encountered carnivore, and this for me was a concept that I never really considered. So it was extremely fascinating. And because of the needs of my patients more than anything else, I started experimenting with carnivore. And what I found is like the first thing, it was like really important, I think, is like eliminating all those like the flours, like the baking, like all those like low carb flours even, and like letting the inflammation in my body really subside. So also grounding, and like, I've gone through a really high period of stress in my life through divorce and moving and feeling really uprooted, and having a mostly meat diet has grounded me and enabled me to, I think, mostly feel sane and not have to deal with things, like anti-anxiety medication or antidepressant, like so many women that are going through perimenopause, excuse me, talking for a long period of time. That's my throat dry. So being able to be stable, like stable mood and stable mind and focused mind. And also when really like seeing my body and like my muscle tone improve, and as I went carnivore. And another thing I was dealing with was like, the switch from perimenopause to menopause. So the fibroids and all the hormonal and the stress and adrenal fatigue, definitely. So that's kind of what I was facing when I started eating a mostly meat-based diet.
I can relate to a whole lot of what you said, so I get where you're coming from for sure. So, when you first started going more carnivore, how did you implement the diet? Like, what did you eat? What's an average day like for you? And did you have any transitional issues when you moved more meat based?
So I like to eat nose to tail. I've always eaten nose to tail. I grew up in Italy and I was so blessed and lucky to grow up eating organ meats and, you know, liver and brains as a kid. So this was one of my habits that I kept. We also ate raw meat at home. That was a normal thing since I was a child, like what, like steak tartare or carpaccio, you know, or different ways to prepare it in Italy. So that's another thing that I kept throughout my life and definitely like opt through carnivore. But my day usually looks like I would eat eggs in the morning and either some sort of dinner leftover, or my favorite thing is actually 2 eggs and a lamb patty. I love ground lamb and I love lamb in general. I can eat lamb every single day. So whenever I can find ground lamb that's, you know, good, clean ground lamb, then I will have 1 or 2 little patties, like about a half a pound of lamb and 1 or 2 eggs. Sometimes no eggs, just lamb. If I can't find lamb, then I'll do beef. I don't do pork. I don't eat pork. I haven't eaten pork in the last 4 years because of spiritual reasons. Um, Before I ate pork, especially in Italy, we have amazing prosciutto and pork products and pork fat, lard and pancettas. Like you know, if I could eat pork, I would definitely have some of that. But then I usually eat a steak for lunch, maybe a ribeye. And then at dinner, if I'm eating dinner, I would have an early dinner. Sometimes I do only 2 meals a day, you know, and like I try to have a really light dinner if I have any and early, so around maybe 5, 6 o'clock. If I have any planned matter, that's when it goes at dinner. So I might have a salad, and my gut actually does well with some fiber because I don't have a very compromised gut. Luckily, you know, I never ate a lot of grains. I never ate processed food. So I'm one of those people whose gut is still somewhat whole, you know, despite of all the pesticides and toxins and stuff. So my gut can tolerate fiber quite okay. What I don't like is grains, so I don't do grains. But I would do heirloom greens or maybe sometimes a little bit of fruit in very small amount and low sugar fruit like berries. And that would be a night together with maybe a night I would do chicken or fish and shellfish, oysters. I also love cod liver. That's one of my favorite snacks, but I usually eat it for breakfast. So I would eat cod liver and eggs or anchovies and eggs for breakfast. And then like, you know, my steak usually is in the middle of the day because my digestive system is quite slow and it takes me to just steak. So if I eat it around like maybe 12 or 1 o'clock, I know that I won't be finished digesting until like 7 or 8. So I don't want to add on too much stuff, you know, and mostly like, you know, if I bring in some carbs for dinner is what helps me sleep because I also, you know, the recent perimenopause and starting of menopause. So I found that some carbs really help me sleep. So I might do a, you know, a little baked sweet potatoes in winter or a salad in summer, and that'll be my dinner. But mostly I try to stay keto and high fat for morning and lunch. And then if I introduce any carbs, it will be only for dinner.
Very good. Did you have any problems at all when you started like eating more and more meat and cutting out some of the other stuff? Did you notice anything?
When it, I tried to be strict carnivore for about 3 months to see if the adaptation period, you know, just like go through the adaptation period and see what would happen. And my gut really did not like it. So because of the hypothyroidism, I tend to constipation more than diarrhea. I never had diarrhea even once. I mean, high protein. I didn't matter. I could eat 3 ribeyes and in a day and never had diarrhea. But I did tend to like not have bowel movements and have difficult bowel movements when I was strict carnivore. And I experimented with electrolytes, and you know, I'm a nutritionist, so like I know my electrolytes. So I definitely worked with electrolytes, and I worked with more fat, different kinds of fat, to see if that would address it. But after the 3 months period, I realized that for me specifically, having some fiber in the diet was beneficial when I kept my, you know, my routine the way that I have it now. So having a strict keto morning and lunch, you know, enough fat for my calorie usage, and then like bringing in like the fiber, plant fiber at night in the form of carbs, like starches sometimes, or I mean, bringing in the carbs in the form of fiber and starches, you know, depending of what I needed. And it also really helped with some of the other, you know, like mood issues from menopause, which are real. I know that those of you who are experiencing that, they know it's like, no matter how healthy you are, you know, and for me, I think the worst part was stress and having like huge changes in my life in the worst possible time in my life. Like, I don't recommend divorcing in the middle of like menopause or perimenopause. Is not a good thing. But having more meat and really anchoring now my diet with meat, I think was like what enabled me to go through these changes in a healthy way, like mentally and emotionally and endocrine wise, because it didn't completely fry my adrenals. And like, I think that the health of our adrenals as perimenopausal women is really, really important. And, you know, enough protein and enough fat will give you the foundation for healthy adrenals.
That's awesome. Okay, so after you have been on the meat-based diet for a while, can you tell us how some of the symptoms you mentioned in the beginning, how they have changed for you? How have they improved?
Yeah, you know, I think that I worked my way through the worst part of, you know, the transition to menopause. And I also got to say that, you know, there are other things that I forgot to mention. Like, I had heavy metal toxicity twice. I had mold intoxication 3 times, you know. So I might look healthy, but really it's been quite an adventure in my health journey. So, and my life has been stressful in general. And I also, you know, I know that I have CPTSD, so complex PTSD from childhood, which is something that will affect your physical health in big ways. And those are things that I had to navigate my whole life without even really knowing what they were. So my adrenals have always been kind of walking at night at tightrope, because like when you're born with this kind of stressors, you know, your immune, not just the immune system, but your endocrine system is already compromised from birth. So even through that, I was able to maintain a decent level of health through my diet. And now, like with carnivore, definitely I've been able to go through a lot of passages and changes, and, you know, including menopause, perimenopause to menopause, in a way that I never took any medication. I am not on any medication. Think that I've never been on any medication aside from like the occasional ibuprofen, you know, for pain, especially when I had fibroids. Um, and oh yeah, I forgot to mention I had gallbladder disease. Yeah, how did I forget that? I had both my mom and my grandma had their gallbladders removed. Mine was perfectly healed through nutrition, and even though now I do a high-fat diet, my gallbladder is just fine. So yeah, I had no shortage of challenges. And I also think that having a meat-based diet is a great age reversing strategy. And I'm 51 and these are my real hair. And then I think that my grays actually got less and less the more meat and meat products and, you know, minerals from the meat that I ate. I drink a lot of bone broth. I eat a lot of bone marrow. So I think that that is part of like my skin being really good and my hair like having no gray. I have friends who are my age who are plant-based and their hair is completely gray, completely. And I was just like, something is telling.
Well, that's great, and you're so lucky about the hair thing, because when I went through my health problems and I had a major health scare and a lot of stress, my hair was literally shocked white, like overnight. Like I noticed every single hair on my head one morning was white. It
Wow.
is the most bizarre thing. I just did a video on that because it's still considered to be like a myth, but I went through that. And stress, that goes to tell you just how stress can affect your body, like what you just attested to. That stress was horrible on you. And I think it's really cool that the carnivore diet and even keto can help with some of that, the emotional part, the even the psychological part, because it kind of gives you that calming feeling. So I'm really glad that you were able to, transition and better. Not that what you went through was great, but it could have been a lot worse.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
kudos to you. Yeah, and can you tell me, how is your blood glucose now? You mentioned that you were kind of the pre-diabetic range. What's that like
Um, it's fine. It used to be like in the 140s, 160s, and now it's like, especially since I do the carb cycling, that has helped I went through the phase of physiological insulin resistance where I was eating very strict keto and no carbs. And then, so in the morning they were higher around 100, 110, and then came down during the day. But now they're pretty much like in the 80s and 90s. They might not ever be super low like some people in the 60s and 70s, but I'm happy with my 80s and 90s. And I don't get cravings. I don't ever, even if I do carb cycling, I never get this like sugar cravings and carb cravings. I'm back in ketosis the next morning,
now? That's
start the
great.
day with my fat and my protein. And like, you know, even though I know there's been moments in menopause transition where like you do get cravings back, even if you're keto adapted for years, not just months, years. And all of a sudden the cravings are back. And like, you just like, it's mostly emotional, I think, and hormonal. And I just feel it. I feel the hormones come at you in waves. Um, and that's when I eat protein. you know, I might do some chocolate sometimes, like when things are rough, but like, I feel like this is mostly, it's been about a year now since my transition into menopause. And so I feel like things are finally settling and I don't need like those little crutches anymore. And I'm back into my routine. And I do eat a lot of ribeyes and New York steaks.
That's great. Yeah, I'm just starting my journey, so I hope it goes as well as yours did. I'm a little bit, oh no, I'm not ready for that, but whatever. But I'm old, so it's all good. Anyway, thank you so much for being on and telling your success story. I think it's amazing. And y'all be sure to go check out her interview with Sean that she did right before this. It was very informative. I think you'll get a lot out of it. So be sure to check her out on the Meet RX podcast too. And thank you, Vivica.
Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye bye.